The spice must flow. Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 106 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about geocaching. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you so much for joining me today. And it's interesting because we are getting really close to theaters being open up here again. I feel like in the next few weeks or month, we're going to be there and we're going to be back open and people are going to be able to go out and we're going to do things and it's going to be amazing, and I can't wait because I have not been able to watch A Quiet Place Part 2 yet because it's only in theaters. I think there's something like a 45-day delay time on when it's going to be in theaters to versus when we can watch it online. So, in that 45-day period between when it came out and when it'll go online, I'll either watch it when it comes out online, or if theaters open up before then, I'm going to then watch it. Kind of a whichever comes first type deal. We'll get to it then, and then we'll talk about it then, but I don't think it's going to be next week that I'm going to have a review for A Quiet Place Part 2, so it's going to be a little bit on hold for that one. One thing that I have been doing lately, though, before we get into today's topic, which I find really, really interesting, is that there are people online who will film themselves watching movies for the first time, or they'll film people watching movies for the first time, and they'll edit it down into a video and put it on the internet for people to watch. And I have found this very fascinating, specifically with The Lord of the Rings. I've been watching a lot of videos of people watching The Lord of the Rings for the first time and seeing their reactions and seeing their questions, and I've had a ton of fun watching those kind of videos, and I feel like that's something that I definitely could not do because I just don't watch movies that way. When I sit down to watch a movie, I'm in movie watching mode, and I'm pretty blank and straight-faced for the most part, just kind of taking it in, observing, listening, paying attention. Any questions that I have, I generally don't vocalize it. If I'm watching a movie with my wife, I will make the odd comment here or there, but I try not to talk or discuss things as much as I can while watching the actual movie. So if I were to do something like that, I feel like it would be very, very boring content. But other people are very interesting to watch movies and like see their reactions to stuff. And speaking of reactions, today I am talking about Cruella and how I thought about that movie. We're going to talk about non-spoilers first, and then we'll move into spoilers as per usual. So if you have not seen Cruella, it's on Disney Plus with premium access if you want to check it out. Or if theaters are open where you're living, it is also showing in theaters. So there are some people who got to watch it in theaters. I just watched it at home. Me and my wife, we sat down, and we had a really good time with watching this movie. I thought it was pretty good for the most part, just to give a general impression of how I felt about it. But we're gonna do a bit more of a deep dive here. So why don't we talk about Cruella? So this movie was directed by Craig Gillespie, and really the only other thing of note that he's directed is I, Tonya, which I thought was really good. I've been meaning to rewatch it lately. It's been on my mind because it's got Allison Janney, and she's really good in that movie, and Margot Robbie is good in it too. So he directed I, Tonya, and now he's directing Cruella. He's got a couple other movies under his belt, but I would say most notably he is known for I, Tonya, and then now Cruella. And the story of this movie is it's an origin story of Cruella de Vil, who is known as the main villain in 101 Dalmatians and 102 Dalmatians, or Spot's Great Adventure, or there's some kind of direct-to-video sequel. And then there were a couple of live-action ones as well in the 90s where Glenn Close played Cruella de Vil. And then now we have this new one with Emma Thompson as Cruella de Vil. And the movie opens with Cruella as a kid. It shows her birth. And when she's born with the half-black, half-white hair. And Cruella is narrating, saying, "Oh, this is me as a child, and I was always born to stand out, and I'm really awesome." And we go through her childhood, and her name is Estella when she's born, and her mother has this saying of whenever she's behaving badly or behaving poorly, she says, "You are Estella, you're not Cruella, don't let Cruella win." And so we're given this kind of dichotomy within the character of she can choose to follow her bad side or she can choose to follow her good side. And so her good side is Estella and her bad side is Cruella. And right off the bat, I found that to be a very interesting kind of point of view. I was really worried that this movie was going to be the misunderstood villain type aspect, like what they did with Maleficent, where, oh, like, she's not really bad, like, she just kind of had a hard life and no one understands her. That's not what this movie is. This is, she has a clear choice between being good and being bad, and she makes the conscious decision to follow down the bad path and be Cruella de Vil. That's what this movie is, and I really appreciate it being that, as opposed to trying to cast this villainous person in a good light. That's not what this movie is. It's a lot more mature than I expected. There's, like, death and murder. There's, like, the threatening of killing puppies, if that's something that really upsets you in a movie. That is something that comes up here, because Cruella de Vil wants to kill the Dalmatians to make a nice coat. So there's those kind of elements in here. Now, this movie is kind of a blend of two other movies. If you can imagine the movie Joker meets The Devil Wears Prada, that's what Cruella is. It's Emma Stone as Cruella is wanting to be this fashion designer and enter into the world of fashion, and she becomes employed by Emma Thompson's character, who is known only as the Baroness, and they have this rivalry, camaraderie type relationship, but then at the same time it's like a villain origin story, and that's where the Joker elements come in. I do think this is better than Joker, because I've mentioned before on the show, I don't think Joker's very good at all. And what I found interesting about this movie, what is most compelling about this movie, is when Emma Stone and Emma Thompson are on screen together, they have just dynamite chemistry. They are friendly, but it's undertoned with a lot of, like, subtle rivalry, and they maybe don't 100% like each other, but then Emma Stone is working for Emma Thompson as Estella, but then she starts her own fashion line as Cruella under this disguise, because she wears a red wig to hide her black and white hair, but then when she's Cruella, she takes that wig off. So she has this other persona, and the Baroness is very frustrated by Cruella kind of taking over the fashion industry, because the Baroness has been in charge of fashion for forever, and that's where this whole rivalry comes in, and I find it so compelling to watch, just the two of them on screen hating each other, and, like, neither of them are good people. This is not a story about heroes. They're, like, it's just antagonist versus antagonist. But the movie doesn't just have these two characters, we have some others in the movie as well, and the surprising delight of the movie is the characters of Jasper and Horace, who, if you've seen 101 Dalmatians, they are her henchmen, and Cruella has these henchmen who go around and they're kind of blundering idiots. That's not what they are in this movie. They have opinions and they have character to them, and they sometimes push back against Cruella a little bit if they don't agree with what she's doing, and I found that very interesting. They also provide a lot of the movie's comic relief, so anytime they're on screen, they're generally quite funny, but they're not as one-dimensional as you would expect a henchman-type character to be. Now, I'm not saying that these are fully fleshed out, three-dimensional characters who are incredible and have this big arc that they go on, but they do serve a purpose to the story, and their presence is important, I would say. I would say they're important to the story, and they're a lovely addition, and anytime they're on screen, it's generally pretty enjoyable to watch. We do have some characters, though, that are not important to the story and don't really matter at all, and I kind of wonder why they're in the story at all. And there are two ones of note here. Artie, that is this person who owns a fashion store that Cruella de Vil sometimes goes into and talks to, and then gets this guy to make outfits or something. He's just kind of there. And then Mark Strong plays a character I think Mark Strong is the valet for the Baroness, and also doesn't really have much to do and just provides some exposition at some points. So I feel like his character is kind of wasted, especially with a talented actor like Mark Strong. I like him a lot, so why don't we get some more things for him to do? Because Mark Strong is really talented, and I like when he shows up in things. Like, he had more to do in 1917 than he had to do in this movie, and he only has like 4 minutes of screen time in 1917. So let's if you're gonna have a minor character like that, let's not give the role to a pretty famous, well-known actor like Mark Strong, unless they have plans for his character in the sequel, which I'm going to talk about in the spoiler section. And so unless they have future plans for that character, that they wanted to get someone more famous so that the character could have a bigger role in the next movie, then that's something I could understand. But if this movie is just a standalone, having Mark Strong makes zero sense. So we could have done without his character, we could have done without the character of Artie, and this movie would be just as well off as it is already. As long as I'm talking about the negative characters, why don't I talk about some of the other negatives about this movie that I have? It feels a little long. It does kind of drag a little bit. I think it has some pacing issues. When you get to a certain point of the film, it feels like you're at the end, like just like the way the story is going. And then the movie goes on for another about 25 minutes and builds up to another kind of finale type ending. So I feel like this could have been tightened up a bit. This movie probably could have been closer to 2 hours and would have been a lot stronger. You could have cut out some of the stuff with Cruella as a kid, even though I liked the young actress who plays young Estella and Cruella. I feel like that sequence goes on for a really long time, where we see stuff with Cruella and her mom, and then what happens to her mom, and then she meets young Jasper and Horace, and they have like thieving adventures together as kids. That to me isn't really necessary. We don't need a lot of that. And that's something that we really run into with these origin stories or retellings of stuff. We get these long opening sequences of these characters as children that don't have as much bearing on the story as we need to. And a really great example of that is when the new Mulan came out, the live action Mulan. We see her running around as a kid, and it's awful. It's a terrible opening sequence. It could have been completely cut out of the movie. It has zero bearing on the story. It doesn't give us anything except a longer runtime. So scenes like this in the beginning, I feel, don't need to be super long or there at all. So with this one in Cruella, we probably could have only gotten like 5 to 10 minutes of her as a kid. I think this is more like 20 or 25. I'd have to go back and check for sure, but it's quite a long opening sequence. And the movie as a whole, I think it's 2 hours and 17 minutes. It could have been a little shorter, a little tighter on that runtime. And then also, the biggest flaw that this movie has is its visual effects. The visual effects are horrible. Looks really, really bad. We have some CGI dogs, and there are some CGI stunt work that's a little later in the film, and both look really, really bad. There's nothing redeeming or high quality about these effects at all. These digital dogs running around, it looks horrible. There's no other word I can use to describe it. It's horrible. It's unpleasant to look at. Like, I can tell what's happening. It's good enough for that, but you can also like 100% tell that this is very, very fake, and that's not what visual effects are supposed to be. There's kind of one more point that I want to make before we get into the spoiler section, is that during the movie we get this kind of fashion war between the Baroness and Cruella, and I found that very fascinating. There is like kind of a montage of all these different outfits that Cruella is making, and the way that it's edited with like newspaper headings and titles and stuff going through, I found that to be very interesting. Is a little bit different from like your more run-of-the-mill type montage. So I liked that. And yeah, that's I think that's going to be it for non-spoilers. I do think this is a good movie. I think it's worth watching. I'm probably going to watch it again. If it comes out on 4K Blu-ray, I'll probably pick that up. Before I get into the spoiler section, though, I just want to say, like, how does this compare to other Disney live-action movies? And I want to say it's not the best. We're in this kind of era where we get either these live-action Disney movies or kind of a continuation or a prequel in live action. Movies like Christopher Robin and Cruella kind of fall more into that territory, but I'm going to lump them all together for the sake of what I'm about to say here. So my favorite of this era of live action Disney is definitely The Jungle Book. I think Jon Favreau's Jungle Book is so good. The visual effects there are astounding, and the execution of that story and the things that were changed, and I think it just is a seamless recreation of that story, but told in a different way. So I think that's probably the best. I also really like the remake of Aladdin, so that's probably my number 2. And then for my third best is probably Cruella. I would say Cruella ranks pretty high for me on these new Disney movies. Like, I think this is definitely better than Cinderella. It's for sure better than Mulan, because Mulan was awful. I liked it more than The Beauty and the Beast and all those other ones. So I would say that Cruella ranks pretty high. I liked it, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. If you have seen it, stick around with me. We're going to start to talk about spoilers and some specific plot points and details that I liked, some things that I feel didn't work as well. So why don't we get started first off with things that I did not like as much. And what I did not like is the kind of discovery that the Baroness killed Cruella's mom. Because I feel like that, because it was so obvious, it was not a reveal, and Cruella already knew that the Baroness was there when her mom died, so having the revelation that the Baroness was when her mom died, and then a future revelation that, oh, the Baroness killed my mom, I feel like those could have been the same revelation, and I actually thought that they were initially, when she figures out, oh my goodness, like, the Baroness was there that night. I thought that she knew in that moment that it was the Baroness's fault that her mom is dead, and that's not the case, because then later she finds out that, hey, my mom is dead because of the Baroness. So I feel like that reveal was very cheap, almost, is what I want to say. It doesn't have a very good payoff. It's not built up very well, and it's a non-reveal, really, because we all definitely knew before that moment hit. So there's another example of something that could be changed a little bit in the script, tighten up the runtime, and we wouldn't have had the pacing issues that the movie does have. I also wasn't a huge fan of the mid-credit scene, and in the end, it kind of sets up the beginning of 101 Dalmatians. So there is the potential for a sequel, whether it's an adaptation of 101 Dalmatians, or if it's something that still takes place before that, and Cruella is still figuring out who she is now that she has her mansion and she has the car, and it's a fantastic car. I really like the look of it. It's pretty cool. And I also really liked how she kind of set herself up to be her own beneficiary when she fakes Estella's death, but then Cruella comes in and she inherits all of this stuff from herself. I like that. It was kind of like an Andy Dufresne type situation where she creates a persona and then inherits stuff from herself that she's taken, and is somehow the heiress of... Oh, that's right, because she's actually the Baroness's daughter. That one was a reveal that I was a little more okay with than the killing her mom, because the Baroness is just messed up in the head. She's super crazy. One of the biggest narcissists you'll ever see in a movie, and was jealous of her own pregnancy. So when the baby was born, just got rid of it. And it's interesting that that's the direction the story went. Like, it could have went darker, but it didn't actually, and it's fine the way it is. Like, I don't need this movie to be really grim dark like Joker. I'm fine with it the way it is. So that's a thread that I did like. But going back to the post-credit scene and future sequels, and I was talking about Mark Strong in the non-spoiler section, that Mark Strong is kind of now her caretaker or her new valet. So that is interesting, and we'll see if this story continues on. And I think this movie is pretty popular. It's fairly well reviewed, and people are going to see it. I'm seeing a lot of people online who have seen this movie, so hopefully people go see it, and then if we get a second one, we'll get more out of Mark Strong's character. I would appreciate that a lot more. And we'll see where the story goes and how things change. But as it is now, it looks like we're ready to lead into 101 Dalmatians, because for whatever reason, Cruella gives a Dalmatian to Roger and Anita. And I don't know why. Like, Roger and Anita were both characters in the movie, but then I figured out the Anita Darling connection, but I didn't figure out that, like, the lawyer was Roger, like the Roger from 101 Dalmatians, until we got to the end. And it felt really cheap to me. It felt kind of like the same way I felt when I watched Solo: A Star Wars Story, and the guy is just like, you're Han Solo, because you're alone. And I was just like, oh, that's dumb and not really well earned, is it? And that's how I felt with this mid-credit scene. It's not well earned. It's just kind of there, and it sets up for the next thing. I was like, okay, whatever. As long as the next thing that they set up is good, then I guess I'm willing to forgive it. But as it stands right now, it is not a good mid-credit scene. Another thing in the movie that I really liked is the moth dress. And that was something that I didn't really pick up on. And I think it's because we watched this movie pretty late at night, because I got home from work on Friday night and our baby was still up, and my wife was on a video call with some of her friends who actually didn't start watching this movie until about 9 o'clock at night. And because I had worked that day, I was tired from work, and so because we started it so late, we didn't even finish the movie till like 11:30, and so I was really tired by then. But with the moth dress, I didn't notice that there were like these beads on the dress, and then they were to open up and have all the moths in them, and they destroyed all the other dresses. It's quite diabolical. Like, it was something that I really appreciated, and I was like, that is really well thought out. Like, Cruella is conniving. And I liked that aspect of her character in this, is that it's like she thinks through her plots and her schemes and moves all the pieces in place. Like, it shows that she is kind of a formidable villain, as opposed to someone who just wants to kill some dogs, because really that's not that intimidating. Anyone can kill a dog. You just do it, right? But really getting to the root of who the Baroness is and how to destroy her and how to bring down her fashion empire, that side of Cruella I found way more compelling than just wanting to have a nice coat made out of dogs, right? So I liked that a lot, and there were a couple of Cruella's dresses that she made that I found were really cool and super creative, that she uses to upstage the Baroness. And one of them was when she's in the garbage truck, and the garbage truck shows up at the Baroness's event, dumps out all this garbage in front of it, and that's kind of like a big middle finger to the Baroness, right? And then it's revealed that Cruella is inside this garbage, and all of the trash that was just dumped in front of it is incorporated into her gown and outfit to really stick it to the Baroness, saying, like, even, like, I can do better stuff with garbage than what you can do, and your stuff is actual garbage. So I found that really good. And then there's another dress that she wears that's really long, and the Baroness is inside a car, and they like tie the car together so she can't open the doors, and Cruella stands on the top of the car and like drapes the dress around the entire car so you can't even see the car anymore, and the Baroness is stuck in there, and taking all the attention away from her, she's like shrouding the Baroness and bringing the spotlight onto herself. So, like, she wants to be seen, she wants to be loved, she wants to destroy the Baroness at the same time. So all of that stuff and her creativity and how she gets this stuff done, I found to be very well executed. I liked it a lot. Let me just take a look at my notes here. I think I mentioned everything I wanted to mention. Yes, I did. So I think we're at the end of this review here. So why don't I start to wrap things up? Overall, I think Cruella is good. I liked it. I would recommend that people watch it. So if you have not seen it, go check out Cruella. And if you have seen it, I would love to know what your thoughts on the movie were. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Why don't you let me know? You can reach out to me on social media. You can find me on Twitter at PottleNathan, and you can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other places. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It means a lot to me. I would like to be able to talk about A Quiet Place Part 2 next week, but I don't think it's going to happen. So if you have any kind of topic recommendation, you can always feel free to send it my way. So that's going to be it for today. We'll see you next time, and as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.